The forest was alive with sounds that afternoon, but none of them were louder than the pounding inside my chest. We had walked down that path 100 times before, just two friends escaping the noise of the world, yet that day felt different from the first step. The sunlight filtered through the trees in soft golden streams, painting her hair with a glow that made it hard to look away. I laughed at something silly she said, but my laughter trembled, nervous and unsure, because deep inside I already sensed where this might be going. I told myself it was just a walk, just another secret escape, but every glance she gave me made my hands colder and my breath shorter. When she slowed her steps and turned toward me with that mischievous smile, I knew something was about to change. Her voice was barely louder than the wind, a whisper so soft I almost thought I imagined it. "Let's explore," she said, her eyes holding mine longer than they ever had before. I froze. I wanted to ask what she meant, but the words caught in my throat. She reached out and touched my wrist gently, almost testing how far she could go, and the heat of her fingers burned through my skin. For years I had told myself these feelings were wrong, that I was imagining things, but in that moment every denial crumbled. Her hand lingered, steady, like she had already decided, and all I could do was stand there, caught between fear and longing. The forest felt endless around us, the silence suddenly heavy, broken only by the sound of my heartbeat. I felt my breath catch when she leaned closer. She didn't rush. She didn't push. She just stood there, close enough that I could smell the faint scent of wildflowers in her hair. My knees felt weak, and before I could gather courage to step back, she looked into my eyes in a way no one ever had. My chest tightened, my mouth dry, but at the same time something inside me whispered back to her words, telling me this was the moment I had been waiting for without even knowing it. Then, slowly, with a certainty that terrified and thrilled me, her fingers moved to my blouse. She touched the first button as though asking for permission without speaking, and when I didn't stop her, she smiled faintly. The world seemed to hold its breath with me as that first button came undone. The air was cool against my skin, but the warmth of her closeness kept me from shivering. I wanted to say something, anything, but no words could match the storm inside me. She moved to the second button, her hands trembling just enough for me to see she was just as nervous as I was. My heart softened at that, realizing I wasn't the only one scared of crossing this invisible line. Every unfastened button was not just fabric opening, it was a wall falling, a lifetime of denial slowly collapsing under the weight of a truth too strong to ignore. I thought about all the moments that had led us here. The way she had always chosen to sit close to me when no one else did. The times her eyes lingered when I laughed too hard. The small touches she had brushed off as accidental but had always left me awake at night replaying them. Every memory returned in a flood, making sense now in a way they never had before. My mind screamed about rules, about what my family would say, about what people would whisper, but none of it mattered in that forest. Out there, no one was watching. Out there, I wasn't pretending. When the third button slipped open, I finally lifted my hand and touched hers. She froze, looking at me with wide eyes, fear flickering across her face, ready to retreat. But instead of pulling her away, I held her fingers tighter against me. My voice shook when I whispered, "Don't stop." The relief that spread across her face made my chest ache, and for the first time, I felt like I had said something true. She laughed softly, nervous and sweet, and then her forehead leaned gently against mine. The closeness of that touch, the warmth of her breath mixing with mine, made the rest of the world disappeared. We stood like that for what felt like hours, just breathing together, too scared and too alive to move. My heart was no longer racing from fear, it was racing from freedom. For the first time in my life, I wasn't pretending, I wasn't hiding. I was standing there, trembling, vulnerable, yet more alive than ever. The forest didn't judge. The trees didn't whisper. The leaves didn't care. And in her eyes, I saw the same truth reflected. We had both been waiting, afraid, uncertain, but always hoping. As her hand moved again, gently brushing along my arm, I felt the tears sting my eyes. Not from shame, not from fear, but from the weight of knowing this moment was changing me forever. I didn't know where it would lead, or how much it would cost, but I knew I couldn't go back. The forest had heard her whisper, had seen her fingers undo the fabric I had always hidden behind, and now it was too late to return to the girl I was before. I wasn't just exploring the forest that day. I was exploring myself, my heart, and the truth I had been too afraid to touch. And in that quiet, trembling moment, when she smiled through her nervousness and I let myself smile back, the world outside no longer mattered. The only thing that existed was her hand on mine, the sound of leaves above us, and the slow, beautiful beginning of something I had always dreamed of but never dared to believe could be real. I could still feel the forest on my skin long after we walked away from it. The smell of the earth, the cool air brushing against my bare collarbone, the warmth of her hands, it all lingered, haunting me with every step I took. That night, I lay awake in my bed staring at the ceiling, every blink of my eyes replaying what had happened. My chest rose and fell faster just remembering the way she whispered those words, the way her fingers moved so slowly, so carefully, as if she was afraid I would vanish if she touched me too quickly. I pressed my hand against my own skin, almost expecting to feel her there again, but of course she wasn't. And yet the heat of her presence clung to me like fire I couldn't put out. Sleep never came that night. Only the memory, only the questions. The morning light didn't make things easier. I caught my reflection in the mirror, and I swear I didn't look the same anymore. Something in my eyes had shifted, a softness but also a weight. I looked like someone who had seen a door open to a place she didn't even know existed, and now she couldn't close it again. I thought of her smile, of how her lips had trembled when she leaned close, and I wondered if she too was lying awake in her room, thinking about me. The thought sent a shiver through me that was both terrifying and thrilling. At school, everything felt different. She was there, sitting across the room, but the air between us felt charged, like an invisible current only the two of us could feel. She caught my eye once, and we both looked away so quickly that it must have seemed like nothing, but my heart nearly broke through my ribs. Every small movement of hers pulled me in, how she twisted her pen, how her hair slipped forward across her cheek, how she bit her lip when she was trying not to laugh. I had noticed these things before, of course, but never with this sharpness, this aching awareness that made it impossible to think of anything else later. When we found ourselves walking together again, the silence between us was heavier than it had ever been. Usually, we filled the air with chatter, teasing, little stories about nothing. But now every step felt loaded, like both of us were trying to find the courage to speak the truth but didn't know how. She walked close enough that our arms brushed now and then, and each accidental touch burned like fire. I wanted to grab her hand, to hold it tight and never let go, but fear froze me. What if it had only been a moment in the forest, a mistake she already regretted? What if I was reading too much into it? It wasn't until she stopped walking that I realized she had been waiting for me to turn. We stood on the edge of the field, the wind tossing strands of her hair across her face, and she looked at me like she was trying to say everything without words. I felt my throat close, my palms sweaty, but she took one step closer and whispered, "Do you feel it too?" My breath caught. That was the question I had been too afraid to ask myself. I couldn't even nod, couldn't even speak, but my silence was enough. Her eyes softened, and she smiled the kind of smile that makes you believe in things you've always been too scared to do. I wanted to answer her, but instead a memory rose up, uninvited. A memory of all the times I had been told who I was supposed to love, how I was supposed to behave, the life I was supposed to live. Words from my family echoed in my head, words heavy with shame and rules, words that told me what we had done was wrong. The fear twisted in my chest, making me step back before I could stop myself. Her smile faltered, but she didn't let me go. She reached out and touched my wrist again, the same way she had in the forest, grounding me when I was ready to run. "Don't be afraid," she whispered, and the way her voice cracked made me realize she was afraid too. It wasn't just me. It was both of us, standing there at the edge of something dangerous and beautiful, unsure if it would carry us or destroy us. And in that trembling moment, I realized that fear wasn't enough to make me want to walk away. Not anymore. We didn't kiss. We didn't confess everything. We just stood there, the wind wrapping around us, her hand warm against mine, and it was enough. It was more than enough. The silence wasn't empty, it was full. Full of everything we couldn't yet say, everything we were still trying to understand. I felt the world around us blur, and for the first time I let myself imagine a life where this wasn't something to hide, where I could love her openly, without whispers or shame. The picture in my mind was fragile, fleeting, but it was enough to make me breathe deeper than I had in years. That night, as I lay awake again, I realized something I had never admitted before. The forest wasn't just trees and shadows. It was freedom. It was the place where we had taken our first step into truth. And now, even when I was lying in my room with the door locked and the world pressing down on me, I carried that forest inside me. I carried her smile, her touch, her voice whispering not to be afraid. And for the first time, I wanted to believe that maybe I didn't have to be. The morning after felt heavier than any other. I woke up with sunlight slipping across my bed, but instead of warmth, I felt the weight of what had happened pressing down on me. My chest rose and fell slowly, each breath reminding me that nothing would ever be the same again. I tried to move through the day like nothing had changed, brushing my hair, eating breakfast with my family, pretending to listen to their questions, but the truth kept pulling me back. It wasn't just the forest or her whisper or the way her fingers had moved against mine. It was the way my heart had responded, leaping so fiercely that it scared me. Every movement of hers replayed in my mind, every look she gave me echoed louder than words. My body was at the table, but my soul was still standing in that forest with her. When I saw her again, it was like the world shifted under my feet. She walked into the room with the same easy grace she always had, but I noticed everything more sharply now. The way her shoulders moved, the tilt of her head, the curve of her smile. My hands clenched against my lap, trying to keep still. Our eyes met for the briefest second, and it was like a secret lightning bolt passed between us, one no one else could see. She quickly looked away, her face soft but unreadable, and I sat there burning with questions. Was she regretting it? Did she want to forget? Or was she carrying the same weight I was, that heavy, beautiful burden that made it hard to breathe? The hours dragged until we finally had a moment alone. It was in the hallway, empty and quiet, just the two of us and the sound of footsteps echoing far away. She leaned against the wall, her hands tucked in her pockets, and when I stopped in front of her, silence wrapped around us like a cocoon. I opened my mouth, closed it, tried again, but no words would come. I hated how my tongue tied itself in knots when my heart was shouting for me to say everything. She watched me closely, her eyes flickering between fear and tenderness, and then she gave me the smallest nod, like she understood even without words. That nod undid me. I felt tears press against my eyes, and I had to look down before they betrayed me. We walked together after school, not speaking much, but every step felt like a confession. Our arms brushed again and again, and this time neither of us pulled away. At one point, she reached out and let her fingers graze against mine, slow, testing, waiting for me to retreat. But I didn't. I let my hand stay close, trembling, until finally our fingers laced together. That small act, simple and silent, felt louder than anything I had ever said in my life. My chest swelled, and I wanted to cry and laugh at the same time. I had never felt so seen, so exposed, yet so safe. That night I couldn't stop replaying the way her hand felt in mine. I lay awake again, the ceiling turning into an endless canvas for my thoughts. I remembered the way she had looked at me when she whispered in the forest, the way she had nodded in the hallway, the way her hand had curled around mine like she was holding on to something fragile but precious. My body ached with longing, but my mind kept circling around fear. What if someone had seen us? What if my family ever found out? What if this thing between us was doomed before it could even begin? The questions cut me deep, but every time I thought about letting go, I remembered the warmth in her eyes, the courage in her whisper, and I knew I couldn't turn back. We began to find new ways to be close without anyone noticing. A shared smile across a crowded room, a shoulder brushing against mine when no one was looking, stolen moments in empty corners. These small pieces of connection kept me alive, kept me believing that what we had wasn't a dream. Sometimes, when her laughter spilled out, carefree and genuine, I would watch her and think that maybe she was the most beautiful thing I had ever known. And every time her eyes met mine, even for half a second, it was enough to remind me that she felt it too. One evening, as the sky darkened into a soft blue, we sat by the river where no one else came. The water moved gently, carrying reflections of the fading light, and she leaned back on her hands, sighing softly. "Do you ever feel like we're the only two people in the world?" she asked, her voice quiet, almost hesitant. I turned to look at her, and in that moment I saw the rawness in her expression, the way her eyes searched mine like she was begging for honesty. I nodded slowly, unable to stop the tears from rising again. "All the time," I whispered, my voice breaking. She smiled, and that smile was enough to make me believe we could survive anything, but deep down, I knew we were walking a fragile line. The fear hadn't disappeared, it lingered at the edges of every moment, threatening to crash into us at any second. Yet, sitting by the river with her hand brushing mine, I decided that fear could wait. Tonight, there was only her, only us, and the fragile, burning hope that maybe, just maybe, what we had could grow into something real. It began with whispers I wasn't supposed to hear. At first they were faint, like pieces of a rumor floating in the air, easy enough to brush off if I wanted to. But the more time I spent with her, the louder they became. In the classroom, in the hallways, in the spaces between laughter and silence, I started to notice the way people's eyes lingered when we walked too close together. I caught the way their smiles curled into something sharper when we sat side by side. Someone giggled behind me once, the kind of laugh that carried meaning without words, and my stomach twisted. Maybe they didn't know for sure, maybe they were just guessing, but the weight of being noticed pressed on me like a stone. Every stolen glance, every brushed touch, every secret smile suddenly felt dangerous. She noticed too, though she never admitted it at first. One afternoon when we were walking home, her hand hovered close to mine but never touched. I felt the absence like a wound, like a door slamming shut in my face. She walked faster, her voice brighter, talking about random things as if nothing had changed, but I could see it, the tension in her shoulders, the way she bit her lip until it almost bled. I wanted to grab her hand anyway, to tell her that the world could watch if it wanted, that I didn't care, but the truth was I did care. I cared too much. The thought of someone telling my family, of the look in their eyes if they ever discovered what we shared, made my chest ache with fear. At home, I could feel the walls closing in even tighter. My parents always spoke of expectations, of the kind of life I was supposed to have, the kind of person I was supposed to become. They never had to say it directly. I already knew their thoughts about people who didn't fit those rules. Their tone changed, their eyes hardened, their voices dropped whenever the topic came up in conversation. I had learned long ago to stay quiet, to nod, to pretend. But now, after the forest, after her hand in mine, pretending felt like suffocating. I sat at the dinner table, nodding and smiling, all the while hearing her voice in my head telling me not to be afraid. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to hold on to that courage, but inside I was breaking under the weight of two worlds colliding. Despite the whispers and the fear, we kept finding each other. Sometimes in the library, tucked away in the corner where no one ever bothered to look. Sometimes by the river, our secret place where the water carried away our words. Sometimes in the forest again, where the trees seemed to protect us. Those moments were the only times I felt alive, where the fear loosened its grip just enough for me to breathe. She would smile at me, the kind of smile that made my chest ache, and whisper things that made my heart race. She told me once, "I don't care if they talk. I don't care if they know. You're worth it." I wanted to believe her, but part of me wondered if she truly understood the storm that would come if the world decided to turn against us. The first time she said "I love you," it wasn't planned. We were sitting under the trees, the light of the setting sun falling across her face, and she looked at me like she had been holding it in for too long. Her voice shook, but the words spilled out anyway, "I love you." My heart froze. I had imagined those words in my dreams, whispered them in the silence of my own room, but hearing them aloud sent me spiraling. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to say it back immediately, to throw my arms around her and let the truth flood out. But another part of me was terrified that saying it would make everything real, that it would push us into a place we couldn't turn back from. She noticed my silence, the way I stared at her with tears in my eyes, and instead of pulling away, she reached for my hand. "You don't have to say it yet," she whispered. "I just needed you to know." That night I lay awake again, the words echoing in my head. I love you. 3 words that felt heavier than the world. I pressed my hands against my chest, trying to hold the feeling in place, trying not to lose it. My heart whispered back, even if my lips couldn't, that I loved her too. I had loved her quietly, silently, in the way I noticed her every move, in the way her laughter lit up the darkest corners of me, in the way her hand in mine made me feel whole. But saying it aloud felt like standing at the edge of a cliff, not knowing if the fall would kill me or set me free. The following days only made the whispers sharper. I caught someone staring too long, someone smirking when she leaned too close. My chest tightened with every glance, every quiet laugh. She, however, carried herself with a calm I envied. When people whispered, she looked straight ahead, her chin lifted, her step steady. I wanted to borrow her strength, to wear it like armor, but all I had was my trembling heart and the fear that one day the walls would come crashing down. Still, every time she looked at me with that soft smile, every time her fingers brushed mine when no one was watching, I knew I couldn't let go. No matter how heavy the whispers grew, no matter how dangerous it felt, I knew deep down that I had already chosen. The whispers turned into shadows that followed me everywhere. They were no longer faint or easy to ignore. They grew teeth. In the hallways I could feel eyes sticking to my back, laughter echoing after I passed. When I turned around no one admitted anything, but their smirks told me enough. I wanted to tell myself it was all in my head, but I knew better. They had noticed. Maybe not everything, but enough. Enough to make me feel like I was walking with a secret stamped across my skin for anyone to read. I started lowering my voice when I spoke to her in public, started stepping away when too many people were around. Each time I did, a piece of me cracked, because I wasn't just pulling away from the crowd, I was pulling away from her. She noticed the change instantly. She always noticed. One afternoon, after another long day of pretending to be strangers, she caught my wrist before I could leave. Her eyes searched mine, full of frustration and hurt, and she whispered, "Why are you avoiding me?" My chest tightened. The words I wanted to say, because I'm scared, because I don't know how to survive if they find out, because I love you too much to lose you, stayed locked inside me. Instead, I shook my head and muttered, "I'm not." She didn't believe me. Her hand slipped away, and the space it left felt like a wound. At home, things grew heavier too. My mother asked why I was so quiet, why I spent so much time out. My father made a passing comment about girls who lose their way that made my skin crawl. I smiled, laughed, played the role they expected, but inside my heart was splitting apart. I wanted to scream the truth at them, to beg them to understand, but I knew their answers before the words could ever leave my lips. Disappointment. Anger. Shame. Those were the only languages they spoke when it came to someone like me. So I stayed silent, carrying the weight alone. The silence between us stretched for days, and it was unbearable. In class I sat far from her, telling myself it was for the best. When she tried to catch my eye, I looked away. When she brushed against me in the hallway, I stepped aside. Each choice felt like a betrayal, but fear had its claws deep inside me. Still, even as I pulled away, I felt her presence everywhere, the way her laughter carried across the room, the way her voice softened when she spoke, the way her absence left me gasping for air. I wanted to run back to her every second, but the whispers reminded me of what I stood to lose. The breaking point came one evening when she showed up at our secret place by the river. I hadn't planned to meet her, but there she was, sitting on the edge of the bank, throwing small stones into the water. I almost turned away, but she looked up before I could. Her eyes were red, her cheeks damp, and I froze. She didn't wait for me to explain. "Do you even care?" she asked, her voice shaking. I opened my mouth, but the words tangled into knots. She stood up, brushing dirt from her hands, and her voice rose with the anger she had been holding back. You let them scare you. You let them decide for you. You're pushing me away, and I don't know how much longer I can take it. Her words stabbed through me. I wanted to run into her arms, to tell her she was wrong, but I couldn't deny it. I was letting the fear control me. My eyes blurred with tears, my throat ached, and all I could whisper was, "I'm sorry." She stared at me, her face breaking, and for a long moment neither of us moved. Then she shook her head, turned, and walked away. The sound of her footsteps fading into the night crushed me in a way I had never known before. That night was endless. I lay curled on my bed, tears soaking the pillow, my chest heaving with the ache of losing her. The silence of my room was unbearable, filled with every word I hadn't said, every truth I had buried. I kept hearing her voice in my head, raw with pain, "You let them scare you," and she was right. I hated myself for it, hated how weak I had been. But the fear was real, the danger was real, and I didn't know how to be strong enough to fight it. Days turned into weeks, and the distance grew. She stopped waiting for me after school, stopped trying to catch my eyes in the hallway. I caught glimpses of her sometimes, laughing with others, her smile brighter than ever, but I could see the sadness behind it. Every time I saw her, a part of me broke all over again. I wanted to run to her, to beg her to forgive me, but my feet wouldn't move. I stayed rooted in my fear, drowning in my silence, while the girl I loved slipped further and further away, and yet, even in that emptiness, I knew the truth. No amount of pretending, no amount of distance could erase what I felt for her. The love burned too deep, too real, to be smothered. It ached in every breath, in every heartbeat, reminding me that no matter how hard I tried to hide, no matter how far I let her go, she was a part of me now. And losing her, truly losing her, would destroy me far more than any rumor, any judgment, any whisper ever could. The day I saw her again in the forest, it felt like fate had dragged me there. I hadn't planned to go. My feet had carried me without permission, leading me down the familiar path lined with tall trees and quiet air that once felt like safety. My chest was heavy, my thoughts circling endlessly, and I only wanted to be alone with the ache. But when I stepped into the clearing, she was already there, sitting on the fallen log where we had once laughed together. My breath caught in my throat. For a moment, I thought about turning back, but she lifted her head and our eyes met. There was no escape anymore. She looked different, stronger and sadder at the same time. The kind of sadness that comes from waiting too long for someone to choose you. Her arms were crossed, her jaw set, but her eyes betrayed her, soft and trembling with the same pain I carried. I stood frozen until she finally spoke, her voice low, rough. "So this is what it feels like, huh? To love someone who's too scared to love you back." The words cut into me, sharp and merciless. My knees almost gave out, but I forced myself to step forward. I wanted to defend myself, to explain, but every excuse felt hollow before it even reached my lips. "I do love you," I blurted, my voice cracking. Her eyes widened slightly, but she didn't move. The silence after my confession was unbearable, like the forest itself was holding its breath. Tears stung my eyes as I rushed on, my words tumbling out like water breaking through a dam. "I love you more than I've ever loved anyone. But I'm afraid. I don't know how to live with the stares, with the whispers, with my family's disappointment. I'm terrified of losing everything, but I've been losing you instead, and it's killing me." She uncrossed her arms slowly, her face softening, and for the first time in weeks, I saw her guard slip. "Then why didn't you fight for us?" she whispered, her voice trembling now. "Why did you let me walk away? Do you have any idea how much it hurt?" I closed the space between us in 2 desperate steps and reached for her hands. She let me hold them, though her fingers were stiff at first, resisting. I squeezed tighter, afraid that if I let go, she'd vanish for good. I thought protecting us meant hiding, I admitted, tears spilling freely down my face. But I was wrong. All I'd done is push you away and prove to the world that I'm too ashamed of you, when the truth is the opposite. You're the only thing that feels right. You're the only thing that makes me feel alive. I don't want to hide anymore. Not from you. Her shoulders shook as tears welled in her eyes too. She finally let her fingers curl into mine, gripping me like she was afraid of falling. We stood there, crying together in the quiet forest, and something inside me shifted. For weeks I had been running from fear, but in her arms, fear seemed small. When she leaned forward and pressed her forehead to mine, the world stilled. Her breath mixed with mine, soft and uneven, and she whispered, "I love you too. I always have. I just needed you to choose me." The flood of relief that crashed through me nearly brought me to my knees. I pulled her closer, holding her as tightly as I could, as if my arms alone could keep her safe from the world. For a long time, we said nothing, letting the silence mend what words had broken. Her hands clung to me with the same desperation as mine, and in that moment I knew we were both exhausted from fighting against ourselves. All we wanted was to hold on, even if the world tried to tear us apart. We talked until the sky began to fade, our voices soft and honest. For the first time, we let ourselves dream aloud. She told me she wanted a life where we didn't have to whisper, where we could walk side by side without shame. I admitted how much I longed for that too, even if I didn't yet know how to reach it. We spoke about the fear, about the families who might never accept us, about the loneliness that could follow. But for every shadow we named, we also named a light, the way her smile carried me through darkness, the way my laughter calmed her storms, the way our love was already strong enough to survive the cracks we had given it. As the stars began to appear, I looked at her and felt a new strength blooming inside me. Not because the fear had vanished, but because love had finally outweighed it. I realized then that I didn't have to face the world alone. I had her. She was my courage, and maybe I could be hers too. When we finally pulled ourselves to our feet, our hands stayed locked together, refusing to separate. The path back home was darker now, but I didn't stumble. I felt steady for the first time in a long while. She walked beside me, close enough that our shoulders touched, and with every step, I felt the walls inside me crumble. For weeks I had been drowning in silence, but tonight, under the stars, I had finally spoken my truth, and though the world beyond the trees might still judge, might still whisper and scorn, I knew that I could face it. Because she was by my side again. Because we had chosen each other, and that choice was stronger than fear. It happened sooner than I was ready for. Secrets have a way of slipping through cracks, and ours was no different. We had grown bolder after the forest, after our reconciliation. Maybe it was the relief of finding each other again. Maybe it was the foolish hope that the world wouldn't notice if we kept our love tucked into small gestures. But the world always notices. It began with my mother's voice, sharp and suspicious one evening when she asked, "Why are you always with her? Why do you look at her like that?" My fork froze midway to my mouth, my body locking tight. I laughed too quickly, denied too easily, but the way my mother's eyes narrowed told me she wasn't convinced. That night I barely slept, knowing something was unraveling. At school, the whispers turned to stares that lasted too long. A boy sneered as we passed, muttering a word that made my stomach twist. She tightened her grip on my hand in secret, squeezing hard enough to remind me she wasn't afraid, but I could see the fury in her eyes. She had always been braver than me. She didn't flinch under their looks, didn't bow her head. But I did. Every glance felt like a spotlight, every laugh like a knife. I tried to keep walking, to match her strength, but inside I was shaking. I knew it was only a matter of time before someone carried their suspicions home, before the whispers reached the ears of the people I most feared. The breaking moment came on a quiet Sunday evening. My father's voice called me into the living room, his tone heavy and deliberate. My heart dropped before I even entered. My mother sat stiffly on the couch, her lips pressed thin, and my father's eyes burned with something I had never seen directed at me before. "We need to talk," he said. My legs wobbled as I sat down. The silence was suffocating until he finally asked, "What is going on with that girl?" His words dripped with accusation, not curiosity. My throat closed, my palms sweating. I opened my mouth to deny it, to tell the lie that might keep me safe, but my mother cut in with a sharp voice, "Don't lie. People are talking. We've seen the way you look at her. This is not what we raised you for." The room spun. My chest ached with panic. I wanted to scream, to explain, but all that came out were broken words. "She's my friend," I stammered, but even I didn't believe it. My father's fist slammed the arm of his chair, making me flinch. "Enough. This is shameful. You will end this nonsense immediately. Do you understand?" His voice shook with rage, but underneath it I heard fear, fear of the neighbors, fear of gossip, fear of his own reputation. My mother's face was wet with angry tears, and she whispered, "Why are you doing this to us?" Their words pierced deeper than any rumor ever had. Shame, guilt, fear, all of it crashed over me in suffocating waves. I wanted to shrink into myself, to disappear, but another voice rose inside me, quieter yet stronger. Her voice. The memory of her saying, "Don't be afraid." I thought of her holding my hand in the forest, her forehead pressed to mine, her eyes shining with truth. And for the first time, I realized I couldn't carry their shame anymore. It wasn't mine to bear. Tears blurred my vision as I whispered, "I love her." The room fell silent. My father's face turned red, my mother's hand flew to her mouth, and I felt the weight of 1,000 storms crashing down. "No," my father growled, his voice low and dangerous. "You do not love her. You are confused. You will stop this." My mother sobbed, begging me to listen, to change, to be who they wanted. Their voices blended into noise, but my heart was beating louder than them all. For the first time, I didn't bow my head. I sat up straighter, wiped my tears, and repeated, stronger this time, "I love her." The silence that followed was a canyon between us. My parents looked at me like they didn't recognize me anymore, like I had transformed into something monstrous before their eyes. My chest cracked open under their stares, but I didn't break. I stood up, trembling from head to toe, and walked to my room. Behind me I could hear my father's furious voice, my mother's sobs, but I didn't turn back. My body shook as I packed a small bag with trembling hands. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I couldn't stay. I found her waiting for me by the river, as if she knew I would come. When she saw my tear-streaked face and the bag on my shoulder, she rushed forward and pulled me into her arms. I broke then, sobbing against her, letting the weight of everything crash out of me. She held me tightly, whispering into my hair, "You're safe. You're with me now. I've got you." For the first time that day, I believed it. The world had collapsed behind me, but in her embrace, I felt something new, freedom. Painful, terrifying freedom. I knew the road ahead would not be easy. I knew my family's rejection would scar me for years to come. But I also knew that losing her would have destroyed me more than their anger ever could. And as she pressed her lips softly against my temple, I realized that choosing her, choosing us, was the bravest thing I had ever done. The first night away from home was the hardest. We stayed in her small room above her aunt's garage, a place that smelled faintly of old wood and lavender detergent. I lay on the narrow bed staring at the ceiling, the bag I had packed sitting on the floor like a reminder that my whole world had been left behind in a single evening. My chest felt heavy with grief, but when I turned and saw her lying beside me, her hand resting close enough to touch, something steadied in me. I reached for her fingers and she closed around me instantly, like she had been waiting. No words passed between us, but the silence wasn't empty anymore, it was full of promise. The next morning was quieter, calmer, though the ache in my heart was still raw. We sat by the window sipping weak coffee, watching sunlight filter through the leaves. I felt the sting of what I had lost, my parents' voices, my childhood home, the version of myself that once believed I could keep everyone happy. But alongside that pain was a strange, trembling sense of freedom. For the first time, I didn't have to hide. For the first time, I had chosen myself, chosen her, and that choice gave me strength I didn't know I had. Days turned into weeks, and slowly we built something that felt like home. It wasn't grand, just small rituals that stitched our lives together. She'd leave little notes for me when she went to work, folded scraps of paper with words like, "Don't forget you're brave" or "I love your smile." I'd wait up for her with tea, listening for her footsteps on the gravel. At night we would lie awake talking about dreams we never dared to speak before, traveling to places where no one knew us, building a life where we didn't have to explain our love to anyone. Sometimes the fear crept back in, fear of my family's rejection, fear of being discovered by the wrong people, but her presence anchored me. When she laughed, the sound made the world feel safe again. When she looked at me, I believed we could survive anything. The hardest part was the silence from home. My phone buzzed with messages at first, angry, pleading, filled with words that cut deep. I read them in secret, my stomach twisting, my heart cracking all over again. But over time, the messages stopped. The silence hurt more than the words. It felt like I had been erased, like the people who raised me had turned their backs completely. Some nights I cried into her chest, mourning the loss of the family I once had. She never told me to stop crying. She never told me to be stronger than I felt. She just held me, whispering, "It's okay to hurt. I'm here. I won't let you go." Slowly, I realized she was teaching me something my parents never had, that love doesn't demand you to erase yourself. Love doesn't punish you for existing. Love holds you when you're weak and celebrates you when you're strong. The more I let myself believe this, the lighter my heart became. The shame that once ruled me began to lose its grip, replaced by a quiet pride that we were still standing despite everything. One evening we returned to the forest, the place where it had all begun. The air was cool, and the ground was damp with fallen leaves. Standing in that clearing again, I felt a rush of memories, the first whispered promises, the first fear, the first taste of freedom. She slipped her arms around me from behind, resting her chin on my shoulder, and I leaned back into her warmth. "We made it," she whispered. My throat tightened, tears threatening, because she was right. Against all the odds, against all the fear, we had chosen each other and we were still here. I turned to face her, my hands framing her face. For a moment I just looked into her eyes, seeing all the strength and love that had carried me through. Then I kissed her, slow and certain, not with the desperation of before but with the calm of knowing we had a future. It wasn't going to be easy, life rarely is, but it was ours. And for the first time, that was enough. We walked back hand in hand, not caring if anyone saw. The sky above us was painted with stars, and every step felt like a promise. I thought about the girl I had been, afraid, hidden, torn between love and fear, and I realized she no longer defined me. I had shed her like an old skin. In her place stood someone braver, someone who could hold love openly, even in a world that didn't always welcome it. That night, as we curled up together under the thin blanket, she whispered, "No matter what happens, I'll never let you fight alone again." I pressed my forehead to hers, tears slipping silently down my cheeks, and whispered back, "Neither will I." And as I drifted to sleep in her arms, I knew the truth with a certainty that filled every corner of me. We had survived the storm, and together we would weather all the storms yet to come.